So hello, welcome to our on-demand webinar entitled Sustainable Manufacturing. If you're in manufacturing and you've got a vision to be more sustainable, if you've set yourself some carbon reduction goals, then hopefully this will be of interest to you. But just by way of kind of brief introductions, my name is Fraser Thomson. I'm the Business Development Director here with Cimlogic. I've been with the company and involved in the manufacturing sector for almost the last 15 years now. So quite a deep understanding of what it takes to be a world-class manufacturer, both in the UK and overseas. My passion at the end of the day is to try and help manufacturing become more sustainable, become more efficient and effective, and help them adopt technology to achieve those things. Stephen?
Hi, I'm Stephen Langley. I'm one of the business analysts here at Cimlogic. One of my key roles as a business analyst is to understand businesses and how they want to improve, whether it's OEE or energy consumption.
Okay, so just as a kind of brief agenda for today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability. It's a big word. It gets used in many different ways. So what is it? What is it in context of today's webinar, and what does it mean for manufacturers? Again, could be many different things, whether we look into how our businesses are going to stay in business for the next 5-10 years, or how we're going to become more efficient in terms of our energy consumption, for example. And then we're going to look at how we as a company, Cimlogic, can help manufacturers get some quick wins in this area, both quick wins in the short term, but also give you kind of sustainable benefits for the long term. So without further ado, let's kind of step into it, and not to kind of scaremonger everybody at the front there, but why is sustainability such a hot topic? Well, it's everywhere at the minute. Climate change is in the news. You look at all of the kind of government initiatives of the G7, the COP sessions. Certainly here in the UK this year, we've had temperatures that have exceeded 40 degrees for the first time on record. It's slightly more than I could cope with without any air conditioning. We're not really geared up for that in this country. You hear on the news of wildfires, both in Europe, in Australia, in North America, for example, are becoming fairly kind of commonplace at the moment.
We see more and more extremes, aren't we?
Yeah. So whilst we see those kind of extremes of climate change in action, really, we all need to be a little bit more conscious of what we can do to really kind of to benefit and help us change and reach those carbon reduction goals that have been set globally. So what is sustainability, and what can we do? As I once heard, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was a director, I think, of a dairy company once said, while he was giving a talk, that becoming a sustainable manufacturer wasn't just about themselves and their operations. It was about their supply chain, about the logistics. It wasn't just about energy efficiency. It was about how they can make sure that their supply chain are fairly treated and rewarded for their efforts, for example. So sustainability is a really big topic, as the kind of word cloud says on the screen. And as everyone is setting themselves these goals at the minute for 2030, 2050, reaching carbon reduction targets, net zero, is what can we actually do to set realistic targets?
Yeah, you've set the targets. You've got to have an action plan in place to achieve those targets.
Yeah. I mean, how can I optimize my utility? It says output there, but maybe consumption is a word that you could use there equally. So those are the kind of topics we're going to be talking about, specifically with a focus for manufacturers. So what's the kind of world saying, and what are we doing? So I think this data comes from the World Economic Forum here, both on this slide and the next slide, but it breaks down carbon emission reduction targets into what's called Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3. So again, as it says on the screen, Scope 1 is emissions from sources that you own or you control. Scope 2 is the generation of heat, electricity or steam that you purchase. And then the Scope 3 is consumption that's brought about through your activities, for example, your day-to-day, your marketing activities, for example, or your advertising, logistics and so on. So if you look down the chart there, manufacturing is our primary focus. We can see there that most manufacturers are focused highly on setting themselves targets in around kind of scope 1 and scope 2.
Yeah, in your control.
Yeah, things that they control. How much do they consume while they are producing the product they're making, for example? How much do they consume running the office next to the manufacturing facility, in the lights, in the heating, typical kind of utilities that are consumed within manufacturing. We kind of call them wages. Water, air, gas, electric, and steam are all kind of big consuming utility units that can all be measured, really.
So how can we lead the way in sustainability to reduce the environmental impact? So we're not adding to the greenhouse gases and adding to the issue with global warming. How can we design our processes so they're sustainable for the future? Reducing waste in design and production, making our products and processes as efficient as possible, not just for the cost of the production, but to make it as efficiently as possible, using your resources efficiently, whether it is your labour or gas, electric, steam, and also looking at the transportation of your goods, minimising transportation. Do you move the manufacturing facility close to the packaging facility? Do you move your process close to your customer? Or do you look at green ways of transporting, ways to minimise the impact to the environment?
Yeah, one of the areas that we tend to get involved in most often is that kind of reducing waste in the kind of design and production activities, is that consumption while you're producing, or actually the lost consumption in any waste that we produce. For example, if you're overfilling a bottle, or if you're having to throw away a PCB that was 80% manufactured, for example, all of that has cost associated with it, and typically manufacturers might have looked at the cost of the raw materials, the cost of the labour.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you need to add the cost of the utilities in there as well. And these 5 points here again were defined by the World Economic Forum, and the little quote there on the right, which I'll just read out for emphasis: transition to a net zero industry, untapped opportunity for leaders in manufacturing to increase innovation for growth, competitive and reliance. And that's how we see it, really. This is a massive opportunity for manufacturers, both from the perspective of being more efficient in terms of the costs, but also if you look at things like ESG and how it features in the boardroom these days and in corporate reports. This is how investors are making their decisions these days. This is how employees make their decisions on which companies they might want to work for. And if you have a more environmentally friendly image or brand or policy, for example, that will be looked on very favourably for both investment and employment opportunities.
So sustainable manufacturing. What is the global view on sustainability? Are you delivering your public responsibility? Are you doing your bit for the environment? Is your global production visible? Are you meeting the visibility targets set by your business with reporting and KPIs that are clear for your employees, for the global community to see that you are improving? Productivity and quality. Is your productivity improving? Is your quality good? Is the energy consumption part of the picture with it, is that low? Are you improving year on year? Enterprise-wide connectivity. With these targets you're setting, can everybody see the goals? Can you see your improvement? Is there a smart way of visualizing your transformation journey and where the business is now compared to in the future? With all this, analytics and decision making is key. You need to look at the data, analyze it, make it visual so you and your organization can see the clear road ahead.
Yeah, the general kind of consensus is that manufacturers have an opportunity to be smarter.
Yeah.
With the way that they go about capturing, measuring, and improving. In this case, from a utility standpoint, I think Many of the manufacturers, I suppose, that you and I would visit it would still be a surprise to them, I suppose, when they get their utility bill every quarter as to how much had actually been consumed. And at the end of the day, at the end of the quarter or at the end of the half, or whenever you get your statement from your supplier, it's too late. You've lost the opportunity to do anything about it at that point in time. So you need to bring that right back, start capturing some data, add some context about data, and then see what you can do to kind of drive improvements. And whether that starts with Bob on the shop floor walking around with a clipboard around the kind of the gas meters, the electricity meters, that's a start. That's some data, but again, it's got to be actionable, contextualized data that actually helps you improve. Really, that's what we want to kind of focus on being able to get to.
Yeah. So where do we start? With any improvement process, whether it's improving the quality in your business or reducing your energy consumption, we always start with measuring. You need to understand where you are today, so you can understand where you are tomorrow. See if you have met your targets.
You can't improve what you can't measure.
You can't, yeah, exactly. So you need to start by measuring, so you know your baseline, where you are today, so you can look at the improvements. Understanding factors that go into the energy consumption, your lighting, your production, transportation, how efficient things are in your process. Do you use large amounts of gas, electric? Are there simple, quick wins, changing light bulbs to LEDs, for example? There's many examples at home where you can measure using your smart meter. You can understand the impact of turning on the kettle or the dryer or the high energy consumption device, and you can see the impact from it. That's
your context at the end of the day, isn't it? That's, what device was on, what time of day was it, what was I doing? At 5 p.m. I turned the washing machine on, and all of a sudden my electricity consumption went over target.
And with business, when your production lines are running, so if all 5 production lines are running, you'd expect your energy consumption to be high.
Yeah.
But some examples are, if all 5 lines are turned off and your consumption is still high, you can ask the question why, because you understand and you've measured.
Yeah. And we'll see some good examples like that later on. In that context, what product was I making?
Yeah.
Who was on shift? What supplier of raw materials was I using? It's all valuable context.
Yeah. And we move then on to improving. Once you've measured and understood, you can put forward a plan for improving, whether it's changing the light bulbs, like mentioned earlier, or changing transportation routes, preparing to adapt for the future with new technologies can be one of the improvement paths you take. And whichever improvements you choose as a business, you need to ensure that you learn from these and make sure that you can sustain these improvements. It's not just a short-term win, and next month your consumption is back up to where it was.
Good stuff. So here's just a very quick overview of a case study that we've been working on here recently at Cimlogic. We are working with a global manufacturer in the CPG sector. Now, their challenge is, again, as many companies have, they've made carbon zero pledges, in this case by kind of 2030, looking at reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by about 30%, which would require about 2 to 3.5% reduction year on year in utility consumption. So you look at it in the big scheme, look at it as a big number to get to by 2030. Actually, you break it down year on year, that number becomes a lot more achievable, something you can actually aim for. I want to get 2% better in the next 12 months. I think that's something if we're given that as a target.
They've got to be realistic targets.
We'd be quite happy that it was achievable there. So in this case, we've got an enterprise-wide data capture system. At the minute, there is zero visibility across that enterprise. There's no real-time data on how energy is consumed. So what we're looking at doing there is, again, collecting our 5 main utility consumption points: water, air, gas, electricity, and steam, metering those using IoT technology, getting us some real-time monitoring and alerting of our consumption and data usage, again, to the people that can make a difference in real time. And we talked about, again, that the energy bill turning up at the end of the quarter and it being a surprise. Well, actually, this is data at the point and to the user who can actually kind of make a difference with it. The benefits are, again, that we're going to be using their existing manufacturing execution platform to do this. That's really important because that's the context. Those data systems within manufacturing that have the product that we're running, the shift, the ambient temperature, the mix time on a blending vessel, for example, all of this is really key information when it comes to trying to drive improvements. And we're looking at then a rapid kind of global deployment, and we'll go through an example of the actual speed of deployment of system a little bit later on in the session. But we'd just like to run through a few examples of what we can do and how we can help. Again, we're looking at, right, first of all, what are our kind of quick wins? We've got typical systems. Systems are available that will monitor your electricity, but again, they tend to be kind of isolated. At that point, they are giving you just consumption data. Again, I'll reiterate the point again, but context is key. Yeah, it's going to be the context that helps you drive those improvements. And importantly, if you tie those into the 6 big losses, your traditional kind of lean manufacturing losses, startup losses, waste, for example, in production waste, each of those has a utilities impact, and we touched on it earlier. Setting smart targets are going to be key for us as well. So let's get into having a look through some of what our solution can do and looks like.
So on this slide here, you can see a consumption trend for a typical factory. If you look along the bars, you see one standing out as lower than the rest. So this here is, the top graph is your production line, OEE. So you can see your production line is running and it's a production state, and the bottom graph is the utility consumption. So you have 2 pieces of information there to compare. So you can see the normal average consumption when your production is running, and when the production isn't running, you would expect a dip. So you're not using as much. So you can compare and see the peaks and troughs of your production and the consumption associated at the same time.
Yeah. And this is all about setting a baseline, right? Yeah. So we've got to set a baseline. We've got to know what normal is. If we don't know what normal is, we don't know what abnormal is. And abnormal is where we're going to be able to make those savings. So find out what normal is, set yourself a baseline. But once you've got that kind of baseline, then it's about, right, how do we understand there and set ourselves some targets? As you can see in this particular example, we've got targets set for each year's reduction. We can break that down quite granularly again, using that factor there. Actually, a target for 2030 seems quite large and may be too far away, too unachievable, too big. Actually, let's break it down year on year, break it down into those 5 kind of cost streams of water, air, gas, electricity, and steam, and set ourselves a realistic target for the reduction of each, really. Here we have an example of how the kind of data can be used, really. So in this case, we're looking at energy consumption whilst we're running, but also whilst we're not running. You want to talk through this one a little, Stephen?
So you'd expect, if your production line isn't running, that you wouldn't be consuming any utilities, but there's always lighting in machines, computers running. So there is a normal consumption when machines are not running. But with the screen here, we can see the difference between your running state and your not running state. So you can see those 2 normal consumptions. With like this, you cannot see too many peaks in the screen we've got here, but with the improvements, it's all about identifying the abnormalities. So is there one of your pieces of equipment that is abnormally consuming more electricity due to a fault in the machine, a fault in the process? So once you can visualize these peaks and troughs, your teams can act upon them.
And it's about identifying those quick wins. Again, the real quick wins, energy consumption, utility consumption, whilst you're not producing. For a manufacturer, they are the kind of real simple big wins here is during that period where we're not producing, we still have a level of utility consumption. What can be done?
Yeah.
Do the lights need to be turned off? Does the blender need to be turned off? Is it still mixing with an empty tank?
Yeah.
All of these things can be identified quite quickly.
But one of the things I like about the system we offer, it's giving your operators a frontline display and real-time costs so they can understand the impacts they're making to the process and the costs with the energy consumption. And they have a point at the production line where they can see and flag up any issues and costs, and they can see in real time how much on running the process and real-time numbers.
Yeah, there's kind of two levels of that. There's this kind of top-down approach where your board, your investors are concerned about your carbon footprint, your emissions, what's your CO2 equivalents. From the shop floor up, you're more looking at the cost. What is my cost to manufacture this particular product? So you've got those they're not competing KPIs, they're cooperating KPIs, but one's top down and one is bottom up, and you need to be able to present both to help drive the right people to make the right decisions. In terms of getting those people to actually see the data, again, the system that we're offering here is completely mobile friendly. You'll see the screen on the left there is tuned in for a kind of handheld or mobile device. So all of the dashboards, again, are visible to the people wherever they are. They may be on the shop floor. They may not be next to their desk with instant access to the internet. They might be at home. Actually, you're 50% your electricity, and you need to know about that. It's an exceptional event. How do we get those notifications out to people? So having that ability, again, is quite important to present the right information to the right people at the right time. Importantly, everyone might need different access or different views of the data. Again, this is just showing us a very simple export of the data into Excel to give us a quick heat map. Where do I go? Where should I go first? If I was going to go and do a shop floor walk, where do I go first? Do I go to line 1 where everything's running smoothly? I've got no particular problems, consumption is normal, or do I go to line 5 where there is an overconsumption event that's active?
Looking at the peaks of the consumption.
So, again, having all that information to the right people empowers everybody, and having our operators on the shop floor empowered by data to make good decisions based on that data is going to be fantastic and help us become, again, more sustainable manufacturers.
There's also notifications you mentioned a short time ago. When there are events that are out of the ordinary, our system is set so we can have notifications sent, emails, text messages, alerting of an out of control event. There is high consumption, for example, in electricity on line 1. So you can, in real time, respond and set your teams to investigate what this peak is.
And we can have those built as dynamic procedures as well. So it could be, for example, the system knows you're producing product XYZ on line 1, and the last time you produced that product, you had a particular issue with your energy consumption when you did the changeover. The last time that issue was resolved, the operator performed steps A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if that event occurs again and we know about it, we can present that information. We can present the last known fix as a knowledge base within the alert and build that procedure.
Build it in a reaction plan.
Yeah.
Something's gone wrong. Here's your reaction plan. Do X, Y, Z.
Again, that's that on that the arrow diagram. That's the final step, isn't it? It's actually how do you drive the improvements, but how do you make that improvement sustainable and let you go up to the next level, and here's a good example of an implementation we've recently completed for a company called Water Wipes. Again, they're a leading manufacturer of environmentally friendly wipe products, and they recently went through an ISO accreditation for which the system was used. We managed to get through the installation of the system in, I think, just about under a week. I think once all the metering was in place, obviously then the system was installed over the top, and a little quote there at the bottom, again, without the system, it would have been hard for them to achieve their ISO 5001 certification, which is a great stamp for us, a great stamp for the company, and just shows you what actually can be achieved in recording and monitoring this data within a very small space of time.
Yeah, making your data work for you.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. If you do have any questions, again, this is an on-demand webinar, so if you'd like to send any questions or inquiries you do have, send them through to inquiries@cimlogic.co.uk. Again, my name's either Fraser or Stephen. If you ask us by name on the email, either one of us will be able to get back to you. We do have an office location both in the UK and in Toronto in Canada, North America. We'll be happy to assist you with any of your sustainability targets. Thank you.
For your time.